Mayingan was our brother at one time in the history of creation, who we know in English as the wolf. So when the wolf hunt here in Wisconsin took place, I knew there would be something that would be happening with the people then, because they were intentionally going to annihilate a population of beings that was directly related to us. And all I said to the people, what happens to them will happen to us. So that started the time in our history where people began to die. At least 1 or 2 or 3 a week in our community. The first one I remember, which was only a day or 2 afterwards, was a young woman. It wasn't her. It was the baby she carried for 9 months. She was somebody who took good care of herself, and for some reason she became ill. And her baby died within her, like a day or 2 after they started that wolf hunt. What I found too at that time was that the wolf hunt took place at the time that the female wolves were pregnant. We recognized that that started what would be a year-long loss within our community. And I lost count of the number of people when it got to, I think it was 47. And it wasn't, this or that. It was a variety of different causes, but we had not seen that for many, many years that had happened. Mayingan, what happens to them will happen to us.
So to give you an example of the power of our language, the Anishinaabe language, nitage, nitage. And what that word means is to go out and kill something for food, like a deer or a moose or an elk. But that word also means to mourn the death of a loved one. That same word, nitage. So the way I think about this, kill something for food, mourn the death of a loved one, when you combine those two thoughts, it tells us that we shouldn't kill animals for sport. We shouldn't take pleasure in their death, but we should actually mourn in some way when we have to take the life of an animal to feed our family. It should not be a sport. This should be a sacred ceremony. And that's what that little word, nitage, tells me. And then we have in February of 2021, that brutal wolf hunt season.
The way it came together, I thought, was too hasty, too rushed. And then it had this combination where the conditions were great for hounds. I hate to use that term, perfect storm, but it really was a perfect storm.
About 20% of the state's wolf population was killed in just 3 days. So an example really of how easy it is to kill wolves. I think, if folks experienced a 14% decline in their salary, they'd probably feel that was a significant percentage. And certainly if you have the Ojibwe view, that this is literally a 14% decline in your relatives, it holds a lot of meaning and a lot of significance.
It was devastating for a lot of us who feel that connection to Maingan. To me, it felt like an assault, a brutal assault on my wolf relative, our wolf relative.
I remember exactly where I was when I had read that they had gone over their quota in a day. And I cried hard. I mourned those losses and I had immense anger. One of the things that I try to remember to do is use my anger constructively instead of destructively. So how do we get creative with protecting our wolves? If we want to save the land, we've got to be with the land. If we want to save those we care about, we've got to be with those we care about.
In many countries around the world, the beliefs of indigenous people about animals have been ignored or treated with contempt. Yet I know from personal experience that there can be a connection between humans and animals on what I might call a spiritual level. Native Americans lived in partnership with wolves and other animals for hundreds and hundreds of years. Their beliefs should be treated with respect. Governments owe it to these people to preserve their culture, to try to make up for how abominably they have been treated in the past, and in some cases, sadly, still are today.
I remember the words of Mike Wiggins, who's the tribal chairman of Bad River. He says, if you ever see a wolf in the wild, it is definitely a cosmic experience. And for me, I reflect back on the 2 times that I'd ever seen a wolf, and I can literally say that was a cosmic experience for me.
It's wonderful that we have, nearly 1,000 wolves in Wisconsin. That's something that many people never expected to see. But they're here, and we have a responsibility to manage them. And too often people seem willing to settle for the idea that as long as the wolf population sort of stays viable or just above the endangered species list here in Wisconsin, that's good enough. That's not the way we manage deer or bear or just about any other species that we're entrusted with the responsibility of caring for.
I try to find the angles that you're not seeing everybody else hitting on. My most recent column, that's why I went and talked about, they're all bashing on this current Wisconsin wolf plan, and a lot of people are unhappy about it. So I thought, well, what other management plans do we have out there? Well, Minnesota has a wolf plan. Michigan has a wolf plan. They're fairly recent plans that were written. And we also have a fairly recent plan for deer, a fairly recent plan for bears. And you start reading all those and you realize this wolf plan isn't a whole lot different in its philosophies and the science behind it and the development of science that, the population estimates we can do that we've improved on. And like I say, I can't say that I swayed everyone because I didn't. I still got plenty of people just, doing the mocking laughter emoji on me, that kind of thing, which is the kind of how you communicate a lot these days is through emojis.
I think we really need to think of wolves not as just something that we keep sort of minimally alive. We don't keep a postage stamp population, but that we try to manage them from a sense of ecological health and really trying to gain as much of the ecological services they provide as possible and keeping this landscape as healthy as possible with their help.
What I would love to see is a healthy respect for the wolf, and the wolf being a part of our ecology, our environment. I would like to see the wolf be recognized as a contributor to a healthy ecosystem. So our scientists at Glyphwick and other scientists too as well, we're beginning to realize that the wolves actually provide an ecological service to the deer population. And in fact, the wolves can actually manage the deer better than humans can.
They have a place to keep our environment healthy, take care of the sick animals, if you will. That's part of their purpose. As part of their purpose on the land is to keep everything healthy, to take care of the sick animals.
There's good reasons to think that wolves are probably the best wall of defense we have against the encroachment of chronic wasting disease into northern Wisconsin.
Chronic wasting disease among the deer population in the south would proliferate because there was nothing taking them out, thinning out those herds that were suffering from that illness. I tell people CWD is like the zombie apocalypse for deer herd. That's what it is. And it is Maingan who helps them, helps those deer herds.
This season probably had some impacts or may have influenced the ability of CWD to intrude. And really the big example of that, I think, happened in Shawano County, Wisconsin. Just a month before that hunt took place, the DNR announced the first CWD positive in Shawano County's history. A month later, this hunt took place, and it turns out that the wolf pack that was closest to that location where that CWD was found was wiped out. Okay, so we don't know yet what the impact of sort of creating these gaps in the ecological benefits that wolves provide, how that's going to play out. But it's kind of remarkable to me that we seem willing to take the risk of opening that door with the really sort of unsophisticated and relatively poorly regulated harvest that we saw.
I believe we're making a mistake when we open up a season, for our brothers hunting. That's a mistake. And what I'm talking about is nowhere is that written. Nowhere that is written in a treaty, in a state of Wisconsin law, a federal law, etc. What I'm talking about, where it is written in universal law. That's where it is written. It's written in universal law that gives us specific instructions on how to gather medicine, how to take care of the earth, how this water behind me take care of that. That's universal law. So what I'm saying is, when you hunt that Maingan, when you go and hunt that Maingan, you're violating the universal law.
And that's one thing I would like for us to learn, is to learn to work with nature, and understand how nature functions, and that we can coalesce with nature rather than always try to manage it and control it. And we have failed miserably throughout history trying to control nature. And I believe that indigenous knowledge, I believe the perspectives of indigenous peoples, Anishinaabe people, I believe can help to recognize that relationship.
I believe the announcer said when we were talking a little bit earlier, we're only supposed to hunt what we need and take what we need. And this is what the Native American people do. We're trying to protect our rights and all these animals as we walk through life together.
Today our people are in a place to protect our brother. If anybody ever come after my brother and sister, would you protect them? Because you love them. You love them. especially when they're pregnant with little pups in there, and that's what happened. That's even more devastating to me personally. So I look at that as the backbone of humanity in Anishinaabe is the woman.
We as Anishinaabe Kwe, the women, were the ones who ensure that our history is told. We're the ones who take care of that story of our families, right? The same goes with that Maingan, you know. It's those females who take care of that family.
That's our backbone, and they're the one who's going to keep the communities together is the woman. So when the hunt took place this past year, they were killing female Maingan. Ever since the beginning of time, the beginning of creation, the beginning when the Anishinaabe were here, there was always that Zungazi wind that kept going, that love for the Maingan that came forward also thousands and thousands and thousands of years.
I find that the only way to try and influence those determining the fate of animals is to sit down with decision makers and try to find a way to reach their hearts. This is best done by telling stories. Although you may not know it at the time, a story may plant a seed that will slowly change the mind of the person. The less confrontational we can be, the more chance we have of success.
What's the sound of one hand clapping? Nothing. You need a group, and you need to put your hands together. You gotta clap, you gotta make noise. When you harvest 218 wolves in 3 days, I believe it was, and they were supposed to have a week, that's telling me there's too damn many wolves. Well, you know, we polled the people, and the majority of people want more wolves. Well, they're asking the wrong people. It's the people that are directly affected by them are the ones that need the voice.
One year, my granddaughter was in her tree stand, never saw a deer, but saw 6 wolves.
In your lifetime, you'll be lucky if you even see a timber wolf. One must have lived 50 times over, because I've seen them all over.
So I think the 1,000 wolves the count is way off. It's pure wilderness. And we live here, we see them, and something needs to be done.
You know, we live in rural America because we don't want to have to worry about necessarily locking our doors and making sure that we're locked up tight, but just like our friends and neighbors that live in an urban and city environment, we have predators just a little bit different. Ours are 4-legged.
Doesn't matter if it's your dog, or your cat, or your neighbor's sheep, or your sheep, or cow. They take what's theirs because they can. It's unacceptable. So all of that science, all of that counting, all of that stuff isn't working. We gotta fix it.
I've been involved probably 35 years now in this, and it just seems to be getting worse and worse and worse.
Thank you so much for the, first of all, thank you so much for having the interest in following through on this. Keep the pressure on at the state level. Chans and Rob Stack, those guys are really trying to, they've got your backs in regard to the wolf issue, but really, as far as setting a solid number, don't quit. I know it's frustrating. I can assure you, those of us out in DC, I gotta tell you, I don't know when, how, whatever, it's going to happen. But at some point, we are going to get the wolf through this.
I don't think my voice has ever really changed. I've always tried to keep my approach the same throughout my years. When I look back on my career, the theme I keep coming back to so often is, letting the facts that you find tell your story. And then when you find facts that people might not always agree with, you think, well, as a journalist, you put the facts out there and you can't always worry about how people will respond to that information, that the information is what's important, and that over time, if it's good information, it's solid information, you'll figure out that 20 years from now, maybe people will read it and realize, maybe he was right. My first memory of hunting was my dad taking us out for squirrels and rabbits. Besides small game like rabbits and squirrels, I learned a lot about goose hunting, duck hunting, really got into that for a while. And then by the time I was in my late 20s, early 30s, I started to realize that you can't do it all. And so I started to kind of focus more and more on deer. And then eventually I got to the point where I was actually editing a deer hunting magazine. Wisconsin has this law, it's put in 2012, that when it's legal to hunt wolves, we will hold a hunting season. It's in our statutes. And this is, for me, a real different approach to doing things the Wisconsin way. I wish somebody would have talked to this lawmaker. Look, we appreciate why you want to do this, but please don't make this statute. I just don't think that when it comes to natural resource management, that you should be forcing things like that. Because I think when you force something, well, now you might get some unintended consequences and make people making decisions without really thinking things through, which I think I'll argue throughout my life that's what happened in February of 2021 with this hastily arranged wolf season we had late in this time window we had for holding a wolf season. And by rushing it through, because we had to meet a statutory requirement, we ran into real severe problems that blackened the eyes of Wisconsin's hunters.
Unfortunately, many people fear wolves because they've heard stories that have been handed down from generation to generation of how wolves are ferocious and may even hunt and kill humans. These fears are reinforced by stories for children such as Little Red Riding Hood and the Big Bad Wolf.
You don't kill anything just because you can. You need to have a legitimate reason, a legitimate purpose for doing that. And I think that hunt exposed that most people who participated in it were motivated by either novelty. This was an opportunity to kill something they had never killed before, and they wanted to add it to their life list. Or it was motivated by vengeance, by people who had been or believed that they'd been negatively impacted by wolves. For many people, in both the tribal and the non-tribal community, those aren't good enough reasons to take an animal's life, especially a highly sentient, highly social animal like Maingan.
I think our relationship with the wolf is giving us some insight and wisdom about our future. Just as what happens to the water quality happens to us, also what happens to the wolf happens to us. We understand these relationships. We need to start bringing our teachings forward. We need to start bringing our ceremonies forward. And hopefully there will be people that will be open to learning that knowledge, that way of life. And we might be able to save some of these species of animals for our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, into 7 generations into the future. That's one of my hopes.
The Maingan, it's kind of like, are they on reservations too? I mean, are they? Are we trying to put the Maingan on reservations too? So I'd like the Maingan to be free, to have a free spirit.
For the tribes, the original treaties were the treaties that they made with the beings that they depended upon for their survival. Humans were placed here last on the earth because they were dependent on everything that came before them. Maingan took several roles, but a huge one being an educator. That how to survive on this landscape, how to have stamina, how to work cooperatively in hunting, and how to work cooperatively in raising your young. One of the other primary teachings of the Ojibwe is to be humble. And there seems to be a great need to apply that teaching here. We know a lot more about wolves than we did 20 years ago. We're going to know a lot more about wolves 20 years from now. And too often, I think, we try to place the value of wolves and sort of force them to justify themselves by what we know of them right now. Part of being humble is knowing that our knowledge is limited, and that it just makes sense, and it also makes ecological sense to think that a being that spent thousands and thousands of years on this landscape, co-evolving with things like the white-tailed deer, has an important and a valuable role here. And even the parts of that we don't understand or appreciate yet aren't necessarily necessary to justify them having a place here.
What I'd like them to know is that we, as Anishinaabe, know a lot about the wolf. All of those people who have dogs in their houses that treat them like a family member. That being there came from those wolves. And that's how those wolves are, and how they would be with the humankind, right? And how they still are. They're still taking care of us, but what do we do to them? And would we do that to that family member of ours? Would it be okay if somebody passed the law and said, hey, we need to kill, 300 dogs? Is that all right with you? I don't think so.
Gawin and this stuff don't happen for nothing. My hope is that we, not just as Anishinaabe, but as humans, turn and listen to what the Maingan is telling us. They're trying to tell us something.
As children start growing up, we should ensure that they get informed about the true nature of wolves. That wolves are highly intelligent, have a rich emotional life, and have feelings such as fear, anxiety, contentment, frustration, compassion, and so on. Wolves are intensely loyal to pack members and are likely to grieve over the death or disappearance of a close companion. In other words, they show many of the characteristics that make the domestic dog man's best friend. Of course they do. They're the ancestors of all breeds of dogs.
When we look at that pet of ours and they warn us of something that might be coming towards us, that might harm us, the same goes with Maingan. They learn that through Maingan. So we look at those beings there, our friends, our babies, our fur babies. So that's what I would tell them, If it's okay for that fur baby, is it okay for Maingan? I think that's the best analogy we can use.
saw you running through the trees as the first snow fell upon my face. As I stood and watched you run away, an emptiness filled my heart. You were not what they say because of what you do. Keep on running free, even when pushed to the edge. How do they justify what they do? Branded as the evil, something that's so bad. How do they justify what they do? How is it that this can be what they don't understand?